So
Awesome.
hi, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'd like to introduce you to Patricia Bianca Torres, who is a wonderful EMDR therapist and EMDR approved consultant. So I definitely thank you, first of all, for just coming on and agreeing to do this. So Patricia and I know each other. Funny how we met through Facebook groups on EMDR, which is just a great way for clinicians to be connected. And I saw from our comments and things, we had similar views. So I was so excited when she agreed to come on my fun little YouTube channel thing to just chat about EMDR and dissociation. So I'd like to introduce Patricia to everybody.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Patricia Bianca Torres. I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. And yes, thank you, Dana, for reaching out. I love working with complex trauma and dissociation. It's like one of my favorite things. You know, when you start out as an EMDR therapist, you pretty much say that your specialization is in trauma. But obviously, that is what we do as EMDR therapists. So it actually came about to me that I just became specialized in more like with dissociative disorders and complex trauma through the clients that came into my office, and then, you know, the experience that I've had. So it's just something that I feel like a lot of EMDR therapists may not necessarily know, that they have these kinds of clients in their office. And that's kind of why I was like, yes, Dana, let's go ahead and meet. Let's share this information. Everybody needs to know about how to work with dissociation with this type of population, because it's going to be in your office, people.
Yes, it happens so much more than I think we ever realized before we got into EMDR, right? It's so much more common. Yeah. So tell me a little bit, like, how did you find yourself in EMDR? Like, what was your journey just to get to EMDR right off the bat?
Yeah, so luckily for me in grad school, I had a trauma professor who started talking about EMDR, and I just fell in love. And so I got basically trained before I graduated with my master's. So it's kind of interesting, right? I didn't have to tear down the paradigms that I learned. I actually it was my foundation.
It was integrated from the start.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So you see a lot of dissociation with your clients. Like almost everybody that walks through our door, there's elements of dissociation, especially with trauma.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So for you, if you were to give an overview of dissociation to, anyone who's watching this, how would you describe it as it presents itself in session?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So
it's a wide question. I know that because it presents itself in so many different ways. Yeah,
exactly. So I think we were talking about earlier how most people think of dissociation as somebody zoning out, checking out, just kind of having that dazed look in their eyes. But that's not necessarily the only thing that you want to, keep an eye out for, because it's on a continuum, right? So if we think about just generally, single event trauma is going to be on your left-hand side of the continuum, right? Your single PTSD, what we call unicorns. Rarely do we ever have a client that just has one incident, right? And then so
such a unicorn,
the unicorn, exactly. So think of it that way. You're rarely going to have those clients. And so as the client experiences more trauma, severe, chronic, neglect, physical or sexual abuse, that kind of thing, especially attachment, we're moving towards the right of the continuum here, right? So that's where we have our eating disorders, our addictions, our personality disorders, complex trauma. Then we start inching towards the dissociative disorders, where we now have our DID clients and severe DID.
Yeah. And what do those clients who are more to the right, how do they present? Like, what if you were talking with one of your consultees, what would they be describing to you where they might not notice it as dissociation, but you as the consultant might say, ding, 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 that's what's happening here.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, certain clients that come into your office, they might start talking and all of a sudden stop and go, what was I saying?
Yes.
Right.
100%. Yes.
Or what did you ask me? And then they just kind of went somewhere, but they come back and you just kind of like, what just happened right now?
Right. Where'd you go?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Or you
Yeah.
might notice a shift in the room where the client just kind of starts to have more of like a regressed childlike voice or stance or body kind of movement.
Yeah, you notice a state change. For
Right.
sure.
And that's why,
Yeah.
you know, we need to understand what it looks like in the room, but also make sure that we're asking the right questions, like right up front in your history and your intake process.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great point, like in history taking, to really ask those questions about dissociation, right? That's why, like, I think assessments like the DESI are really helpful to getting that comprehensive overview of how present day functioning is being affected.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, there's some really important things we look at, especially like amnesia, time loss, those kinds of things. Somebody who's been in treatment for a long amount of time without a lot of symptom remission. Right. So you want to keep an eye out for those kinds of symptoms.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, especially like you said, individuals who've been in therapy for years and haven't seen any change. That's usually, I think, when people come through our door, right? It's like nothing else has worked. What's happening?
I need EMDR. That's going to fix me. I need to do the trauma work. And guys, please stop.
Yes.
Don't do it right away just because they pay you and they tell you to do it.
Yes. That's a great point. Yeah. I think every therapist needs to know that, like with those clients, go really slow, because otherwise you're going to be spinning your wheels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So what are your favorites, since you do a lot of work with a lot of complex trauma, a lot of dissociation, and what are your favorite techniques to use with clients who are more to the right of that dissociative spectrum, in terms of like resourcing, your favorite resourcing techniques, ways to help ground them before you even get to the more phase 4 trauma work?
Totally, exactly. So if we think about the triphasic model, right, where the first phase is containment stabilization, so a little bit different than the EMDR standard protocol. We do that type of work before we do, like you said, the phase 4 reprocessing, which is like the trauma resolution, if we do the phase 1, 2, 3. So, you know, aside from the safe place or calm place that, you know, that we tend to do initially with every client. One of the biggest things that I really encourage a lot of my consultees is to realize that working with the self system, getting to understand the different parts of self that are there, is in of itself already stabilizing and provides a lot of containment. We slowly break down those dissociative amnesia barriers in a way that we start to facilitate cooperation, because what the destabilization, if we think about it, is a part of self that perhaps doesn't know the bad stuff's not happening anymore, right? They're in an adult body. They're not this 3-year-old, 5-year-old that's helpless anymore. And that's usually what you're noticing in the room when a client is unable to tolerate, you know, strong affect. So once we get those clients on board, we orient them. Again, one of my favorites, we orient the client to person, place, and time. Hey, do you remember it's 2020? You know, you're far away from all the bad stuff. You're in an adult body. And then especially the biggest thing, one of the big things, is to work with those head honchos, right? The perpetrator introjects. These are the guys that got their foot on the brake. You're trying to do the work, and no, something happens. And it's because we didn't gain permission from them. So
that's a really great point. Can you say a little bit more about the perpetrator introject? Because I think that happens so commonly in session. And we're like, why? That's usually when you get the, I don't know. Or it's, you're doing eye movement, nothing. Like, can you say a little more about that?
Right. So this is what I've learned. And again, you know, wanting to speak out some of the trainings and books that I'm referring to right now, specifically is Sandra Paulson's Looking Through the Eyes of Trauma and Dissociation, her book or her webinar, because clients will identify with the aggressor. So with the abuser, the perpetrator, during that traumatic event that happened years and years ago, they identify with them. So there's like this energy, like internally. So they have it within themselves. And a lot of times these parts of selves, the perpetrator introjects parts, don't know that they're actually just a part of your client. They actually really think they're the actual abuser. And so we do the orientation process. We thank them. We help them acknowledge that, hey, you know what? You don't have to do this job anymore. You can do other stuff because you're in an adult body.
Right. When we tell them, like, thank you for all the work that you've done to get this adult here, and your work is done, and we're so grateful, but you're the clock.
Yes, you get to do whatever you want. Go on vacation. You did so good.
Right. Take a break. Like, do something relaxing. Yeah. A lot of times too, I like to use, I think it's Robin Shapiro's, like the reach around technique. Just kind of like notice that part that's like getting in front, and just imagine your adult self stepping in front and pulling back. And just so you can strengthen your adult self and orient your adult self to time, place, all of that. Yeah. Such a good point. Yeah. Anything else? Any other resourcing techniques that you love? I mean, ego state therapy, as you're mentioning, is I think the most important for complex trauma. So complex container. Anything else that you love? I know every client's different, right? So different resources for different clients.
Exactly. So another thing that I do also like is resetting the affective circuits. And that one's also by Sandra Paulson. And but be aware and have caution, because that particular intervention is not necessarily safe enough to work with certain dissociative disorder clients. So you really need to know what you're doing. Got to do the ego state work with that. But it really does help kind of get everything on board so the client can kind of move through when they're experiencing certain emotions. That's one of my favorites.
That's a great one too. And for anyone who's watching, I think that's in EMDR Solutions too, where she references Sandra Paulson's work. That's a great resource to use, but as you said, with caution, because it can, it's not the most appropriate for everyone.
Right. So exactly the same thing. We need to make sure we ask permission from those perpetrator introjects about, hey, can we help the baby out and do all these techniques? And once you get that permission and other kind of ego state maneuvers, you can use the resetting affective circuits, but go get training, get a consultant.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Like consultation is everything, right? Like, you know, this as an approved consultant, I'm working on my consultation status now as a consultant in training. Like, and we see all these things in the groups, and it's so great that people are talking about EMDR. But I think you and I both notice like some things that people bring into those groups where it's like, oh, you really should talk to a consultant about this. So I know that you do consultation groups, right?
Yes, I do. I do run groups.
So can you tell us like a little bit about like how people could find out about your groups if they want to sign up?
Definitely. So I run the Complex PTSD and Dissociative Disorder Study Group monthly. So that's every fourth Sunday of every month, about 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, just to clarify, this group is not for certification, just because EMDRIA's rules and requirements is not allowing, you know, study groups specifically working with certain populations to be considered as certifiable. So just know that people are able to join if they want to get more information about how to work with these clients, particularly, again, with using parts work or stabilizing and containment. And at some points, we also do get to talk about how to help your clients do the EMDR reprocessing work in a more maybe fractionated manner. So you can find more about that on my website. So that's super easy. It's emdrempowered.com. That's emdrempowered.com, and you'll be able to find all the info there.
Awesome, great. And I'll include a link in the comments of this video. So anybody who wants to, you know, learn more from Patricia, because she's an amazing resource, I definitely highly recommend working from her. Everything that from our couple of conversations has been so helpful. So I know we have to like start wrapping up, but before we close up, what's the one thing that you wish every EMDR therapist knew?
Oh gosh, I gotta pick one, right?
I know, there's so many.
Okay, yes, I think pretty much it's slow down if you have any inkling of that there's a red flag. Don't get scared. There's a lot of techniques and things that you can do to help your client. Just slow down, get consultation, take some trainings, and then you will find that you will feel a lot more confident and your client can heal through this. So if anything, I would just say slow down. Don't jump to reprocessing immediately just because your client says they want to do it.
Right. I think that's a great point. Yeah. Everyone's like, well, why aren't we doing EMDR yet? And we're like, we are. It's just because you're not moving your eyes doesn't mean we're not doing EMDR.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's right.
Patricia, thank you so much for your words of wisdom, for coming on and doing this video. I love everything that you're doing about EMDR and spreading the word about like good consultation, appropriate application of the therapy. It helps promote the integrity of the therapy, which I think is wonderful.
Yes, you know what, Dana, and again, I appreciate you reaching out. I love that what you're doing, especially. I feel like all of your YouTube videos and your posts are so helpful. And so thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay, great. And again, if anybody wants to reach out to Patricia, I'll include a link for EMDR Empowered to the bottom of this video. And then definitely check her out, and there's lots to learn. Thanks so much, Patricia.
Bye-bye.
Bye.